The Pittsburgh Steelers are searching for a quarterback. They're making offensive line decisions. They're going to stack up their defense. But there is one name who has been tossed out there as a possible trade, a trade to move on from this offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I think it's a good trade to talk about. What's going on, everybody? I'm Noah Strackbine. Thank you for jumping on to Steelers to Go, your daily to-go cup of Pittsburgh Steelers news and analysis. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, like I said, searching for a quarterback, looking for some offensive line help, probably stacking up their defense, approaching free agency, getting ready for the NFL Combine, and in the back of everything is the thought of possibly trading one of their best offensive weapons. And I'm not going to say that it doesn't make some sense, but it's been brought up this week. It's been talked about a lot. Yesterday, I turned on the radio for about 10 seconds, and in that 10 seconds, it was the only topic of conversation that has come up. And every time somebody tried to move away from it, they continued to bring it up and toss different scenarios out there. So there are a group of people, probably a large group of people, that believe that this is a possibility. And maybe it is. Maybe it's not. But let's dive into it. That name is Diontae Johnson. And it has been tossed out for years. Diontae Johnson being traded here for this, for that, at this moment, at that moment. The Pittsburgh Steelers able to replace him, not able to replace him. There are a million questions, but it constantly brings up the hypothetical. And I think that it has layers to it. Trading Diontae Johnson is not as cut and dry as this is the decision. We have made it easy. You can get this for him. That's enough. Easy. It goes deeper than that. It starts obviously with compensation. It goes into timing. It goes into replacements. It goes into attitude and leadership and Mike Tomlin's connection with him, and obviously the quarterback. There is so much that goes into Diontae Johnson. And I have been a Diontae Johnson supporter since the beginning. I think that this guy is very undervalued. I don't think he's been given the right opportunities in Pittsburgh. He's worked with the worst offensive coordinator in football, has had a really bad quarterback pretty much his entire career. And even in his time with Ben Roethlisberger, the offensive line was so bad that there really wasn't much of a chance to really succeed as a wide receiver. So here he is. He's about to enter the last year of his current contract. Everybody's talking about a holdout coming, and that's going to force a trade, and the Steelers are just going to have to make a move because it's either going to be he doesn't play this season or they move on from him a year early. Let me say this, and this is where we'll start. I do not anticipate a hold-in. I do not anticipate Diontae Johnson saying, I am not playing this summer if I do not get a contract extension. This is not his rookie year. This is not his rookie deal where at the end of it, you are just trying to not get hurt so that you could actually get that second contract. This is a contract number 2. Contract number 3 isn't going to be as big and glamorous as contract number 2. Therefore, you are willing to work it out. You are willing to play it out. That's how everybody works. You play through that second contract so that you can hit free agency and get a bigger one the next year. This is not your rookie deal. I do not anticipate a hold-in. I don't even think that's on the mind of Diontae Johnson or his agents or anybody else. I think Diontae Johnson expects to play this season, hopes that a deal is done before the season starts. But if it's not, he will head into next season, hope to have a big year in 2024, and then get paid even more money in 2025. That's the plan. Don't anticipate a hold-in. But there are questions and considerations when it comes to trading Diontae Johnson. It's not as cut and dry as, well, he's not going to hold in, therefore you do not get rid of him. I think maybe that's a possibility. I think maybe at some point, somewhere along the line, it might make sense. But let's dive into, I guess, layer number 2 here, which is replacing Diontae Johnson. And I think that ties into timing as well. You could look at trading Diontae Johnson right now, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. You could look at trading Diontae Johnson during the NFL draft, and that is when timing comes into play. You could head into free agency and sign a guy like Tyler Boyd, and that's been tossed out there to me more than once. Well, if the Steelers sign Tyler Boyd, they could trade Diontae Johnson. That's not how that works. Tyler Boyd and Diontae Johnson play 2 separate positions. Tyler Boyd is not Diontae Johnson. You are not replacing Diontae Johnson with Tyler Boyd. You are simply adding Tyler Boyd to your slot and saying he is a valuable asset. We really like what he could do in that position, which is not the position Diontae Johnson plays. They are not replacements. And I think it's hard to find a wide receiver of Diontae Johnson's talent level, especially in the offensive, category, the wide receiver category, that X position that Diontae Johnson plays and what he does so well in it. I think it's hard to find somebody who you're going to pay less money for the same amount of value. Just don't think that that's there. And I'm not saying that you can't go get a 700-800 yard wide receiver for less than $15 million. What I'm saying is you're taking a bit of a shot saying we're going to go pay this guy $8 million, $9 million a year and hope that he's that good and works out just as well as Diontae Johnson did. It's a risk. I don't know if the Steelers are willing to take that risk, and I don't know if that risk is worth it. Free agency doesn't seem like the spot to be if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers. To make that trade of Diontae Johnson, send him elsewhere. However, the NFL draft might. And that's when timing comes into play. That's when compensation comes into play. And really, this is going to be a boom, boom. That's the trade. We're moving on. There it is. And it comes down to a couple of things. Do the Steelers have a draft pick in mind? When is that draft pick going to happen? What can they get for Diontae Johnson? If the Steelers have a wide receiver in mind, if the NFL draft starts and round 1, say they select a center, round 2, they select a corner, round 3 is coming up and they have a guy on their big board that they are determined is a year 1 starter. This dude is going to make an impact 100%, zero questions asked. Before the end of day 2, the Steelers have a wide receiver that they feel is the next Diontae Johnson in their hands. If that's the case, you can move on from Diontae Johnson. And chances are you're going to get a second or a third round pick for Diontae Johnson. Everybody's tossing out there, oh, well, what about a 4th round pick for Diontae Johnson? Doesn't make any sense. At some point, you're going too low for a guy that is worth more, and Diontae Johnson is worth more, especially for certain teams. You can look at teams and say, Diontae Johnson's worth the 2nd round pick for the Kansas City Chiefs, or whoever really needs a wide receiver, because Diontae Johnson's a valuable wide receiver. He hasn't worked out as a 1,000+ yard receiver every season in Pittsburgh, but again, he's never had a quarterback, and he's never had an offensive coordinator. It's really hard to get things done as a wide receiver when the 2 biggest components to your success are working against you. I just don't think that's a fair assessment. And I think other coaches will look at him and say, we can make a lot out of Diontae Johnson. I personally think you could get a 2nd round pick. And if you believe that you can get a 3rd round wide receiver or a 2nd round wide receiver, if the Steelers believe that they could turn Diontae Johnson into a trade for a 2nd round pick and use that 2nd round pick on another wide receiver, that makes a ton of sense. It's a lot less money, a lot less of a cap hit. You have many more years to work with this guy than you do just one with Diontae Johnson. And at that point, the trade makes a lot of sense. But I think only in that moment, only in that 2nd round area when teams are flying off the board, boom, 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 boom. And the Steelers are saying, all right, let's call some guys. Omar Khan saying, let's work some magic. Let's make a move here in the 2nd round, early in the 2nd round, mid-2nd round, even late 2nd round. Let's make it happen. Then boom, the Steelers got their guy. Go draft a wide receiver. Go make it happen. That's only if they believe that wide receiver's there. If they don't believe that wide receiver's there, you don't trade Diontae Johnson for a 2nd round pick that you use on a tackle. You don't trade Diontae Johnson for a 2nd round pick you use on an inside linebacker. You don't trade Diontae Johnson for a 2nd round pick that you use on any other position outside of a wide receiver. That's just not what you do. You are not replacing Diontae Johnson with a new center. That just doesn't help your team. You could still get a center and have a wide receiver, and you can't go into year 3 of Kenny Pickett. We're all in on this quarterback. We want him to succeed. We're bringing in Mason Rudolph because we believe he could get the most out of these wide receivers. We just went out and got Arthur Smith, and that's our guy. You can't do all that and say, all right, well, we're going to give him one wide receiver to work with, and maybe Tyler Boyd, maybe Juwan Johnson, or Juwan Jennings, one of those guys. You're not saying, oh, you have 1.5 wide receivers to work with and then Calvin Austin. No, you're not downgrading your offense for a 2nd round pick that you're going to use elsewhere. That's when it doesn't make sense. And the trade has to make sense. It can't just happen because people want it to happen. It has to happen because the Steelers see the value in replacement which could be there. The value in replacement could be there, but it has to make sense. And that all comes down to timing and execution and who's on the board. But the NFL draft is when that would happen. It wouldn't happen during free agency. It wouldn't happen during training camp. If it goes past the NFL draft, Diontae Johnson is sticking in Pittsburgh. Unless they somehow draft a wide receiver, and that's great, and that guy is killing it, and then free agency comes around, and you could get an even bigger return for Diontae Johnson than you were during the NFL draft, but I don't know if that's a possibility. I don't know if you could go into training camp and say, okay, well, we were offered a late second-round pick for Diontae in the NFL draft, but in training camp we're offered a first. I don't know if that's real. Maybe it could be. But the Steelers would have to have another wide receiver on the roster that they feel very confident in. And the compensation would have to be pretty big, I would say. You can't turn that down. And that could happen. Who knows? But it would take a lot. Mike Tomlin loves Diontae Johnson. The Pittsburgh Steelers love Diontae Johnson. They believe he has leadership. I believe he has leadership. He's made some noise in a very negative light. But I think all the wide receivers have, and I don't think they've ever had an offensive coordinator that could keep them in check. And I think Arthur Smith could keep them in check. They've never had a quarterback. Hopefully they get one this offseason. And maybe a move does happen. But it all comes down to timing. And it can't just be because Diontae Johnson's worth this, you should make the move. If you don't have a replacement option, it doesn't make any sense.